Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So guys, today I'll be showing you how to make a 3-layer skirt. So if that is something you're interested in learning or knowing how to make, do keep on watching. So first off, I'll be showing you guys what I need for this project. I have fresh pattern paper which I'll be using. I had intentions of using my original skirt pattern, but I didn't end up using it, and I'll be showing you guys how to make a pattern on the fresh pattern paper that I have. And I have my main fabric which I'll be using to cut the layers of the flare or the skirt, and I have this blue satin, kind of matte satin. It's not so glossy, and this would be used for the inner skirt onto which the layers of the flare would be attached. Okay, so this would be on the inner part of the skirt. Alright, so I went ahead to sketch out what I wanted. I find doing this really helpful. Like, it just helps you like show the design or the idea before you actually start cutting. So this is going to be like the full length of the skirt. It's going to be 24 inches. 24 inches long. That is from the bottom of the waistband all the way to the tip of that last or that third tier would be 24 inches. Okay, so I'm just writing that down again so it's really bold and clear for you guys to see. So the length of the skirt, like I said, would be 24 inches, and this would be from that end of that waistband, not from the top of the waistband, from the end of the waistband all the way to this last tier, the tip of the skirt. So what I want to do is I'll be figuring out how much or how long I want each tier to be. So I want each tier to be 10 inches long. Okay, so since I want each tier to be 10 inches long, I'll be subtracting 10 inches from 24 inches, which is the full length of the skirt. And I'm basically doing this because the inner skirt is going to hold the first and the second layer, while the third layer would be added or stitched to the hem of that inner skirt. So if we're going to cut the inner skirt, we'll be cutting from that waistline all the way to where that second tier ends. Okay, so from that waistline to where the second tier ends is where the inner skirt, or how long the inner skirt would be. And that is the first step, or that is the basic to cut this layered skirt. So I went ahead to draw up my hip line, quarter of my hip line, which is 9.5 inches currently, and I have a center line or a straight line drawn, which is my center front line, and I am going to add 5 inches to that 9.5 inches to get the width of the hem. So you can see I added 5 inches to that 9.5 inches, and that is 14.5 inches, and that is what I have on the hem of the skirt. So you want to ensure that it's wider than your original body measurement, because you do not want it to be fitted or body hugging. It would be really uncomfortable when you do that. So right now I'm just going to take a quarter of my waist measurement, which is currently 8 inches. Then I have it marked out or drawn out already, and my hip, quarter of my hip is currently 9.5 inches. So I'm going to go back into my waist and I'm going to extend it upwards by half an inch and connect it to that waistline. And I'm doing this basically because I find that doing this just helps the skirt sit properly on the waistline. Okay, so after doing that, I will just connect it back to that skirt, that waistline that I have drawn out already. Next up, I'll be connecting that hemline, that bottom hemline, all the way to my waistline using a straight ruler. So do note that I'll have to extend that hip line by 1.5 inches to meet that line that I'm using to connect the hemline all the way to the waistline, just so all the lines meet and touch that diagonal line that I'm about to use to connect, or that I'll be using to connect the waistline to the hem of the garment. So depending on how wide your hemline is, but just extend your hip line just so it meets that line that you'll be using to connect the waist all the way to the hemline. So once you do this, you have something like an A-shaped skirt already. And so let me show you guys something real quick. So that first tier, The first tier would be attached to the waistline, which is at the top here, this waistline. Then the last tier or the last layer of the skirt would be attached to the hem of this A-line skirt that we just created. So what we'll be doing next is to figure out where that second layer or that middle layer would be placed, and to do that we'll be measuring the full length of this A-line skirt and figuring out or dividing that into two by dividing whatever measurement we have by two, just so we can get the midpoint of that A-line skirt. Okay, so I'll be measuring from the waistline all the way to the hem of this skirt. So I'm just going to place my tape from the waistline all the way to the hem to find or to figure out the midpoint of this skirt. So this skirt or this inner skirt is 14 inches long, so half of 14 is definitely 7 inches, and that is where my hip line is currently. So I'm not going to be drawing any other line, so that is where my second layer would sit, right on top my hip line. So after cutting that out, I just went ahead to label the first layer and the second layer of the inner skirt, just so it's easier to identify and I do not get confused as to what is what. Okay, so I'm just going to go over this again. So that first layer would be on the waistline, the second layer would be in between the first and the second layer, just on that midpoint there, and the third layer would be at the hem of the A-line skirt or the inner skirt which we just made. Okay, so you see why I subtracted 10 inches from the inner skirt, because the third layer does not really need any inner skirt to be does not need any inner skirt underneath it basically. So I went ahead to cut out that excess fabric from the center of this of the second part of the skirt, and I'll be cutting this on fold, and I'll be cutting two of this on fold for the front and for the back, while for the top part I'll be folding in that little extension in when I want to cut for the front, and I'll be cutting on fold for the front. So when I want to cut for the front, the up part or the first layer would be cut on fold and that extension will be folded in, but when I'll be cutting for the back, I'll have to open up that extension and cut two pieces of that first layer because of the zip that will be attached at the back. So this is the front piece of the first layer and this is the back piece of the front layer of the first layer, all cut up. You can see the back is cut into two while the front has one full piece that was cut on fold. So what I'm going to do next is to place all pieces of that first layer right sides facing and sew along the sides from the waist all the way to the end. So after sewing, you have something looking like this. You can see it's one full piece and just the zipper allowance that is left open, and I'll be doing the same thing for the bottom piece or the lower piece as well. So having sewn the second layer, which is this part, I'm just going to measure around that hem of this piece to cut out the flare, because I find that doing this would help me save a lot more fabric. So when I cut, I like to cut from the widest layer to the smallest layer. So I just measure around that bottom hem and divide it whatever that circumference is by 6.28 to get the radius for my flare. So currently my flare or the radius for that lower piece was 9 inches because it was 57 inches wide. So when I divide that by 6.28, it was 9 inches, and the length of this flare is 10 inches, and this is going to be the third tier of the skirt, and this will be attached all the way on the all around the bottom of this skirt. So I basically just have it pinned down. Do note that I did not slit this layer or this flare open. Okay, so for the second layer, I'll be measuring around the top part of this inner skirt, the circumference, and whatever the measurement is, I'll be dividing it by 6.28 to get the radius of the flare. Okay, then cut out the length of the flare, which is 10 inches. Like I said, I would use 10 inches for all the layers of the flare. All the layers of the flare would be 10 inches long. So that is what I have pinned out here. It's still not stitched at this point. I basically pinned it right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew that down and sew the third layer down at the edge of the inner skirt, then sew the second layer down at the tip or the midpoint of the layer of the inner skirt. Having done that, I attached the upper part or the first layer of the inner skirt right sides to that, just so it's easier to sew and easier to coordinate, and just so I get all the pieces right. You can see that the third layer is sewn to the hem, while the second layer is in between the first layer of the inner skirt and the second layer of the inner skirt. So what I'm going to do next is to measure around my waist circumference and divide my waist circumference by 6.28 to get the radius for the waist flare, or the first layer of the flare. And that is what I have done already. And do note that this flare is 10 inches long, and this is basically the only flare that has a slit because of the zipper allowance. Because of the zipper allowance. So you can see that for the inner skirt, I went ahead to stitch down the zipper allowance before attaching it to the other pieces of the skirt, just so I know where my zip sits, or how long the zip would sit. So what I'm going to do next is to sew this down all around the waist. I'll be sewing from one end all the way to the other end, ensuring that the waist is held down, or the flare is held down to the waist of this skirt. So having sewn all three layers together, this is what it looks like. You can see that all the seams are concealed and it looks really, really nice and neat. So what I'm going to do next is to fix on my band and my skirt hook and the zip on the back, and that is basically it for this skirt, guys. It's really, really, really easy. Okay, so first I'll be fixing on my zip before attaching the waistband, and the skirt hook would be the last thing to do. And for the hem of each flare, I'm not going to be folding the hem of each flare. I would actually overlock with the industrial overlocker because I find it really easy to do. So this is the pattern for my waistband. I drafted this pattern in my skirt tutorial just in case you haven't seen it, and this is what I'll be using for my waistband. So if you have one, if you don't know how to do this, do check out my skirt tutorial up on my channel. So for the back waistband, that zip allowance or the zipper allowance that I left for the back piece of the waistband, I would not be sewing that in with the zip allowance or the zipper allowance. I would actually leave this out and use it to make the overlap for the waistband, just so I can sew that skirt hook to it. So this would be at the back of the waistband or extended out of the waistband, just so I can fix on the skirt hook. After fixing on the waistband as well as the zip, this is how it looks on me. Yes, I love this skirt. I totally love this skirt. So give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Give me a thumbs up if you found it helpful or learned something, and subscribe to my channel. Okay, if you haven't subscribed, do subscribe. All right, so yeah, bye guys.